let's see here. I was informed by Brenton Eccles about about a document that was published by The Nation regarding Iceland, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. For the last year, Iceland has been undergoing a pretty dramatic collapse. In fact, I have a kind of an amusing memory of flying around last year and being on an airline that had television screens with different programs loaded into them, and one of them was a documentary on Iceland, which was about, I suspect, was about 7 or 8 months old at that time. This was last fall, late fall, when the Icelandic collapse began, very violently, by the way. And this documentary was talking about all the great strides that Iceland had made in their revamping of the banking system, their use of privatization, how they were robust. And obviously, if you look through, if you read between the lines, what had happened in Iceland was the same that happened in Argentina, which was just rampant credit expansion. More and more money created, put it in the system, creating a false bubble, which eventually blew everything out. Smaller countries are always going to be blown out faster than larger countries. The U.S. is on a very slow slide. Of course, the U.S. is in a privileged position because of how powerful the dollar still is, even though it's losing its rank as the world's reserve currency. It's a different paradigm, if you will, a different genre of collapse because of the size, but we're going to be seeing that nevertheless. And Iceland and Argentina serve as great proxies as far as what to expect in the United States and in other places across the world. In fact, there are many collapses happening right now, which really aren't getting that much notice. Let me just read a section of this Nation article that was written by Rebecca Solnit. For those of you that aren't familiar with this, there's just a few highlighted things I wanted to note. You can read this for yourself if you type in, just go do a Google search for Under the Icelandic Volcano by The Nation, written by Rebecca Solnit. Quote, Iceland is now a country whose currency, the krona, has collapsed, whose debt incurred by banks deregulated in the mid-1990s is 10 times larger than the country's gross domestic product, and whose people have lost most of their savings and face debts and mortgages that can't be paid off. Sounds familiar. Meanwhile, inflation and unemployment are skyrocketing, and potential solutions to the crises only pose new problems. The present government may differ from the old, but not as much as the Icelandic people differ from their pre-October selves. They are now furious and engaged where they were once acquiescent and uninvolved. After going hat in hand for bailout funds to Washington, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank, Iceland turned to Russia and reluctantly to the global lender of last resort, the IMF, that temple of privatization and globalization. Usually along with money, the IMF imposes its own notions of what makes an economy work, as it did in Argentina until the country's economy collapsed 8 years ago, leading to an extraordinary rebirth of civil society and social upheaval. In Iceland, the process was reversed. First upheavals in the IMF. Now you have to insurrectionary. Wow, that's a word I haven't seen in a long time. Now you have to insurrectionary public and new incursion of the forces of neoliberalism that helped topple the country in the first place. As economic hard times have spread, so have a spat of protests and insurgencies across Europe, of which Iceland's has only been the most effective so far, suggesting that a new era of popular power in the streets may be arriving. Iceland's upheaval poses the question of what the collapse of capitalism will bring to the rest of us. Last fall, major financial newspapers were already headlining, quote, the end of American capitalism as we knew it, unquote. Capitalism is convolution. Quote, the collapse of finance, and, quote, capitalism at bay, unquote. The implication that something as sweeping as collapse of communism 19 years earlier had taken place. I'm going to stop there. So you can see the dramatic aspect that's happening. And, of course, they are being hit with lots of debt schedules. And basically, when this was made aware to me, they wanted to bring up a petition. If anyone out there wants to support a petition for Iceland, I'm not sure the value of it at this stage, but you can go to savethepeopleoficeland.com and you can participate in this petition. I'm not sure the value of it again. I often think these petitions, while they mean a lot, in gesture, they tend not to really do anything. But I wanted to throw that out there. And basically, Iceland, there's a chance actually based on the communications that were given to me, that we could have one of Icelandic's parliament on the radio show to talk about what's happening. Evidently, this one particular woman is in support of the movement. I've had a lot of people contact me about Iceland, and you might have known, I think I mentioned this before, Iceland actually petitioned their main television studio to show addendum of many, many months back. In fact, I got CC'd with about 4,000 emails when they were doing so, but I never really heard much from anyone in particular. I was kind of hoping to hear more about it. So I'm going to start thinking more about Iceland, because they do serve as a great proxy for what is slowly happening around the world. And it could be a hub for some type of transition. I'm not sure. Iceland, of course, is a little deficient on natural resources. They're kind of like Hawaii in the effect that they have to import just about everything. But uniquely, their biosocial pressures and their energy problems have led them to geothermal, which, of course, is a great alternative. It's great to see that stuff in practice somewhere. But nevertheless, I'm going to keep that stuff in mind. I think it's, I'm going to keep Iceland in mind, and maybe we can start to open up a dialogue, and who knows if we can get someone from their parliament on and get our foot in the door. Maybe Iceland could be a stepping stone in transition. We don't want to throw anything to the wind, but that would be wonderful to see anything like that happen. We do need a government to help. While we talk about city stuff and creating a test city, if we could just find a government that's willing to move forward with even a fraction of the gesture of what we talk about, it would just be a brilliant, monumental stepping stone for our movement. So I will keep everyone posted, and if anyone has any other information on that or is following this, I think there's a section on the forum that's talking about stuff like this. So keep the information flowing.